By the time I reached the Valley Ridge fundraiser, Bryce was already standing beside Sienna Cole like the night had been arranged around her. He had one hand resting near the tasting table, smiling at parents who knew my face from vendor emails but not my marriage. And when I stepped closer, he looked at me like I had arrived late to my own replacement. Sienna held a tray of sample wraps from Harlan Fresh Kitchen, her smile careful. Not cruel, exactly. Just bright enough to tell me she had been warned I might make a scene. Bryce turned toward a group of donors and gave them the line that split my life in half. Sienna is the woman who actually believed in my business. For a second, I heard the ice in a plastic lemonade cup crack louder than the music. I had checked his insurance forms, corrected his kitchen permit language, caught 2 expired vendor certificates before they embarrassed him in front of this same network. But he had chosen a school fundraiser to make me look like the wife standing in the way. I moved toward him because walking away would have looked like guilt, and yelling would have given him exactly what he had prepared for. Bryce leaned close before I could speak, pressed a cardboard box into my hands, and murmured, "I packed what looked like yours. Kendra, don't make this ugly around kids." Pause for S. Inside the box were my old running shoes, a folded sweater, my spare glasses, and a framed photo turned face down, like even my own face had been dismissed from the house. Denise Harlan watched from the dessert table, her expression polished into concern, and Sienna looked away too quickly for a woman who thought she had done nothing wrong. My phone buzzed against the box, and the email preview gave Bryce a second mouth. Removed from vendor review, pending conflict concern. That was when the humiliation became something colder, because he had not just brought his affair into my workplace. He had brought paperwork. I walked out of the fundraiser without looking back, because the hallway held parents and staff who knew my work voice better than my real one. Bryce had counted on that room, making me careful. And the worst part was, he was right. The cardboard box pressed against my ribs as the Phoenix heat waited beyond glass doors, and only in the parking lot did I set it on the passenger seat. My spare glasses slid against the photo he had turned face down. My phone lit again, and this time, I opened the email. Possible conflict of interest and behavioral concern reported by related party sat in the middle of the screen, official enough and ugly enough to sound married. Related party meant Bryce had used being my husband as weight, as if a ring made his complaint more reliable than my records. I sat with both hands on the steering wheel and understood he had tried to move my name to the unsafe side of a school access file. I did not call Bryce, because he needed my voice sharp enough to match the story he had already sold. I did not call Sienna, because she had stood beside him with that tray and chosen the version of me that kept her clean. I did not call Paula, because she could turn one broken sentence into proof. I called Monica Price, and when her clipped calm came through the speaker, I kept my voice plain. "Monica, I need to know whether vendor review records are being preserved." The silence on her end lasted long enough for me to know she had opened the notice. "I cannot discuss an active concern in detail, Kendra, but if you have a timeline, send it from your personal email and do not alter anything." I asked whether a spouse complaint alone could remove a coordinator from review, and Monica did not answer directly, which told me enough. When she finally said, "Preserve your texts, emails, and anything connected to Harlan Fresh Kitchen," the box beside me stopped feeling like proof that I had been removed and started feeling like the first exhibit. I drove until the fundraiser lights were only aglow behind me, then took the first motel off the highway because I needed a door Bryce did not have a key to. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet, and the air conditioner rattled against the wall. I set the cardboard box on the little round table, left the photo face down, and opened my laptop with hands that had stopped shaking. Monica's words stayed in my ear. "Preserve your texts, your emails, and anything connected to Harlan Fresh Kitchen." I logged into the vendor folder through the copy I had downloaded before Bryce's complaint moved me out of the review. Nothing looked dramatic, and that was why men like Bryce Trusted paperwork to stay quiet. Insurance certificate current. Kitchen permit attached. Delivery schedule signed. Conflict disclosure. Clean enough to pass a tired glance. Then I opened the driver clearance list and saw Manny Ortega's name sitting there like a locked door painted over. Manny had been cleared. But Manny was gone. 3 weeks earlier, Bryce had forwarded me an email by mistake, complaining that Manny had quit without notice and left him short before the Valley Ridge tasting. I still had that email because my job had trained me never to trust a clean form without the mess behind it. I pulled up the latest delivery log, and Harlan Fresh Kitchen had still checked in at the campus loading gate twice after Manny left. The driver field had not changed. I whispered, "Bryce, what did you do?" And the answer was already forming in the timestamps. Someone else had used that truck. Someone without matching clearance. And Bryce had let the school file say otherwise. Pause 3S. In another business, maybe that looked like a shortcut. But around a campus, near food service doors and after-school programs, it became insurance risk, safety protocol, and a false attestation with his signature underneath. That was when the circle began to close. Bryce had used a school concern to make me look unsafe inside my own work, but his records showed he was the one asking the system to look away. I saved the email, the driver list, and the loading log into one folder, then sent Monica a message from my personal account. I have the timeline. I did not see Sienna Cole that night. But later, Monica's file showed where she had been while I sat in that motel room building a timeline. She was with Bryce at a bright bar near Scottsdale, one of those places where every table looked small and every promise sounded closer to real money. He had taken her there after the fundraiser because he needed the night to keep feeling like a win. She needed that too, because if it was not a win, then she had stood beside a married man while he handed his wife a box. Sienna asked why I had been removed from review if I was as irrelevant as Bryce kept saying. That question mattered because she worked around school events, and she knew forms did not move themselves. Bryce gave her the version he had practiced on everyone. That I was controlling. That I made every step harder. That I could not stand seeing his business finally get noticed. She wanted to believe him because belief kept her from looking at the statement she had signed. And her own words were already inside the file. I only said Kendra seemed hostile. Bryce. That is what you told me to write. That sentence did not make Sienna innocent. It only made her human in the worst possible way. Frightened of being used, but still willing to help use someone else. Bryce reached across the table and covered her hand, telling her she had protected the pilot from my conflict. But comfort could not erase the delivery problem. She knew her cousin had helped Bryce run trays after Manny quit, and she knew no one had waited for proper clearance before sending him near a campus loading gate. She could call me bitter, difficult, too careful. All the names people give a woman before they need her work. But the statement had her signature. The uncleared delivery had her silence. And Bryce had handed her just enough truth to make the lie feel like a choice. By morning, Paula Harlan had done what she always did when Bryce made a mess. She wrapped it in manners, boxed it like dessert, and handed it to people who trusted a mother's concern more than a woman's record. I heard about it before lunch. Not from Paula, not from Bryce, but from a Valley Ridge parent who had once watched me stop a vendor from serving food without the right allergy labels. Her message came with screenshots from a parent group chat, and the first line made my stomach go quiet. Bryce has been through so much, and Kendra has not made his growth easy. Paula never wrote that I was unstable. She was too careful for that. And careful people know how to leave bruises without fingerprints. She wrote that some women confuse procedure with control, that Bryce had tried to keep things peaceful, that everyone hoped the school network would not be dragged into a private situation. Under it, another parent had asked whether I was the reason Harlan Fresh Kitchen had not been approved yet. And Paula answered, "I only know my son has worked too hard to be punished for someone else's bitterness." I read the screenshots twice, then opened Bryce's complaint again. The words sat too close together to be coincidence. Controlling. Hostile. Interfering with vendor process. Sienna's statement had used the same soft shape, saying I seemed hostile during a school event. Not dangerous enough to prove. Just uncomfortable enough to stain. Pause 5S. Paula had not filed paperwork, but she had given the paperwork a neighborhood voice. The kind that travels through bake sales, teacher gifts, and women who say they are only worried. That was when I understood the second layer. Bryce had used a form to move me out of review. Sienna had lent him a signature, and Paula had given the lie a mother's face. None of them needed to shout, because quiet damage works better in rooms where everyone wants to seem reasonable. I saved the screenshots beside the email, the driver list, and the loading log. Then labeled the folder with the only word that still felt clean, timeline. Monica did not call me with sympathy. By the next afternoon, a preservation notice went out from Cactus Bend School Services to Harlan Fresh Kitchen, Valley Ridge Charter Network, and every person whose name touched the pilot file. It did not mention my marriage, Sienna's dress, Paula's group chat, or Bryce handing me a box in front of parents. It asked for delivery logs, driver clearance records, loading gate footage, vendor attestations, conflict disclosures, and every communication tied to the concern that had removed me from review. The notice was clean enough to scare people who understood clean paper. Bryce called after it landed, and I let it ring once before answering because I wanted him to hear calm, not damage. Kendra, this is insane. You are dragging a private situation into my business. And the way he said private almost made me laugh. I was sitting beside a motel desk with his complaint open on my laptop. His related party language highlighted, Paula's screenshot saved, and Manny Ortega's name still sitting on a clearance list for deliveries he could not have made. You made it business when you used being my husband to move me out of a school review. Bryce. He went quiet. And for the first time since the fundraiser, the silence belonged to me. Then he tried softer, saying he had panicked, saying I knew how much this pilot meant, saying no one needed to get hurt over paperwork. But the paperwork already showed who had been hurt, and it did not need my anger to look bad. Pause 4S, I told him. Monica had the timeline, then ended the call before he could turn apology into another accusation. By evening, Brent Lawson's email reached the pilot committee. He was pausing sponsor support until the access review was resolved. Not because he cared who Bryce slept with, but because no parent sponsor wanted his fitness brand tied to a vendor with unclear campus entry records. That email changed the weight of the room. Bryce could call me bitter. Sienna could call herself misled. And Paula could keep frosting her concern into polite little sentences. But Brent had done what people with something to lose always do. He stepped away from the risk. And the risk had Bryce's logo on the truck. The pilot announcement was held inside the Valley Ridge Event Center, where the cafeteria tables had been folded away and replaced with white cloths, sample trays, sponsor signs, and parents pretending food service was not politics with napkins. Bryce arrived in a new Harlan Fresh Kitchen polo, his truck parked near the service entrance like proof that his future had already backed into the loading lane. Paula stood beside a tray of lemon bars, smiling at every parent as if sweetness could cover a paper trail. Sienna stayed near the backdrop in a cream dress, close enough to Bryce to look chosen, far enough to look professional if anyone asked. I was not in that room to watch him fall. Monica had me in a small office behind the event center, where the air smelled like copier, toner, and old coffee, and my timeline sat on the desk between us. I signed the statement confirming the dates, the complaint, the Manny email, the driver list, and the loading logs, then slid the pen back without saying more than I had to. Monica looked at the file, then at me, and said, "We follow the record from here." That was all I needed. Out front, Bryce was laughing with Brent Lawson near the sponsor table when Sienna's cousin came through the service hallway, carrying 2 covered trays. He had the truck keys, the Harlan logo on his shirt, and the temporary vendor badge Bryce had handed him like a favor that could pass for procedure. At the loading gate, the scanner blinked red. Access hold. The campus staff member did not raise her voice, did not embarrass him, did not turn it into a scene. She only stepped closer and said, "Please wait here while we verify clearance." That was the sound of the door closing, even from where I sat. A minute later, Monica's phone buzzed, and she rose without hurry, carrying the folder that Bryce had once thought he could bury under one complaint about me. In the event center, the director stopped near the podium, spoke quietly with Monica, then adjusted the paper in her hand. The vendor announcement would be postponed pending access review. Brent's face changed first, not with anger, but with the tired disappointment of a man watching risk put on a company logo. Bryce looked toward Sienna, and Sienna looked toward the service hallway where her cousin stood frozen beside the trays. She whispered, "You told me this was handled." But Bryce did not answer. He could not. The badge in the wrong hand had already done it for him. After that day, Bryce did not fall in one loud piece. He fell through short emails, quiet phone calls, and doors that stopped opening when his logo pulled up outside. Harlan Fresh Kitchen was removed from the active vendor list pending review. The pilot contract moved forward without him, and Brent Lawson withdrew sponsor support before anyone could attach his fitness brand to unclear campus access records. Bryce had wanted everyone to see him as the man his wife tried to hold back. But the file showed a man who used his wife's name to hide a problem he created. Sienna was moved out of her parent event liaison role, not because anyone needed to punish her for loving the wrong man, but because her signature sat on a statement that helped turn a personal lie into a school record. Paula lost the fundraiser orders first, then the teacher appreciation boxes. Then the women who used to linger at her counter pretending concern was kindness. Bryce asked to meet me once, saying, "I did not know it would go this far." And I answered from across a mediator's table, "That was never the problem. The problem was that you were willing to make me look dangerous when you thought I could not prove I was clean." Cactus Bend brought me back as Senior Procurement Integrity Officer. I moved into a smaller apartment with a quiet balcony, bought a new dining table, and ate my first dinner there without anyone calling my work just paperwork. If this story reminds you of a time someone made you feel small, hold on to that feeling long enough to learn from it. Sometimes peace begins when you find your own door, walk through it, and stop looking back.